The original doctrines of democracy were conceived hundreds of years ago by Greek scholars who had been unable to foresee an industrial revolution that would consolidate political power in the hands of a few business corporations. The idea of business corporations controlling nations is not a repugnant idea at all. In fact, it is an intelligent idea because it is the business corporation that drives the national economy and creates prosperity. Industrial corporations tend to view democratically elected politicians as obstructionists. In fact, in democracies embracing virile forms of free market capitalism, industry tycoons try to begin their entrepreneurial journey by weakening the power of elected public officials. In the modern world, multinational corporations need to be perceived as political entities that shape policy. Researchers from Princeton University and Northwestern University have examined 1,700 policy issues in America and published a white paper titled Testing Theories of American Politics, Elites, Interest Groups, and Average Citizens. This research paper clearly suggests that mainstream voters in the American democracy have very little influence over public policy. Other lesser democracies of the world cannot be very much behind. In many industrially advanced societies that have embraced the ideals of democracy alongside the ideals of free market Anglo-Saxon capitalism, wealth automatically bestows political clout. This alters political power equations within a democracy. With the Industrial Revolution making its full impact on societies across the world, knowledge that was generated prior to 1925 is now obsolete. Political theories that were put forth prior to World War I are now obsolete. This comes at a time when university education is making citizens lose cognitive skills that are crucial to examining events closely and understanding the real world. In today's world, a college education that does not help young citizens improve their cognitive skills would surely not be worth $200,000. When all the dust settles, it would be worthwhile examining modern history to find out how the world got to where it is now. Astonishing world events that have rocked the boat include the September 11 attacks on the Twin Towers, the collapse of Lehman Brothers, and the Brexit referendum. Other headline-grabbing events include Europe's debt crisis, unemployment levels in Spain, the collapse of Greece's economy in 2010, the Arab Spring uprisings in 2010, the economic crisis in Venezuela, and the impeachment of Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff in 2016. The final nail in the coffin was the election of Donald Trump. All these events have happened while the news media had remained vigilant like hawks. Collectively, all these events present sufficient reasons for policymakers and politicians to begin introspecting. What many intellectuals failed to notice was that political theories contrived prior to the 20th century have become obsolete. They became obsolete after the Industrial Revolution spread its tentacles across the world. In Europe, many illuminating political theories had been contrived in the 18th century. However, these theories had been contrived well before the invention of the electric bulb. During the larger part of the 19th century, while many political theorists in Europe were twiddling their thumbs, an industrial revolution was sweeping by. While most European political philosophers were busy looking for a problem to fit their solution, the Industrial Revolution passed by like a speeding freight train. This explains why most political philosophers were unable to keep pace with technological developments that were altering societies. The Industrial Revolution virtually changed the intrinsic nature of world politics. In fact, capitalist syndicates began to commandeer politics. In particular, multinational business corporations from Europe and America began controlling politics in developing countries across the world. European colonization was carried out through multinational corporations. American imperialism was carried out through banking syndicates. By the 60s, business corporations in America became very influential. In fact, the average working-class voter in the American democracy would have been unable to make his or her way through the political waters without bowing to business corporations who control the flow of money through society. College education needs to make this reality known. In countries across the world, political and social advancements have been unable to keep pace with economic advancement. A string of technological advancements have preceded economic advancements in the past 50 years. After the Second Industrial Revolution brought about by advances in computer technology and automation, economic practices from the old school were unable to ensure the fair distribution of wealth and incomes generated in society. In fact, it became difficult to distribute the fruits of capitalism fairly and evenly. Technologies help concentrate wealth sharply in the hands of a machine-owning capitalist class. In recent times, political systems had not been agile enough to respond to the disruptions brought about by a new family of technologies. Meanwhile, the traditional schools of politics have continued to thrive while giving false hope to the teeming millions who come down to the polling booth and cast their votes. However, at some point in the near future, the bluff might need to be called off. Meanwhile, the elites in power claimed to see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. This allowed them to follow a do-nothing policy while a large bulk of civil society was being kept at subsistence levels. This eventually led to social tensions. Social tensions explain the Brexit referendum in Europe, the election of Donald Trump in America, the election of Emmanuel Macron in France, and the frustration of voters in Germany. These political events are a result of establishment elites openly consorting with capitalist syndicates and turning a blind eye to the problems faced by working-class citizenry. Right in the middle of all this was the corporate news media acting as mouthpieces of the establishment elite. Therefore, in the years ahead, the job of the corporate news media would be to help bring back the establishment elite into the seat of power. Nevertheless, the election of Donald Trump and Emmanuel Macron were gentle political warnings that establishment politicians need to mend their ways. In other words, they should not be ignoring working-class voters who form the social majority within a democracy. Under establishment politicians, the world economy was being configured to allow a few politically prominent business families to lay claim to a lion's share of global wealth. Meanwhile, college education was helping create a pool of loyal foot soldiers for the capitalist syndicates. These foot soldiers, equipped with MBA degrees from the Ivy League schools, set out to create finance-centric economies. One of the objectives of the finance-centric economy was to institutionalize speculation and help make the rich wealthier by a few millions. These finance-centric economies help draw more money into speculative investments and create conditions for jobless economic growth. This explains why students graduating with college degrees might not have enough jobs waiting for them, though economists will falsely claim that the economy is booming. Incidentally, the economy might be booming only for the ultra-rich investor class who get to walk away with excess profits. Recent research by an acclaimed French economist named Thomas Piketty has now uncovered the innate character of the Anglo-Saxon capitalistic economic system. In his famous literary work titled Capital in the 21st Century, Piketty points out that capitalism, as being practiced, is leading to rising inequalities in many countries. According to Piketty, when the rate of return on capital is greater than long-term economic growth, wealth begins to accumulate in the hands of a few wealthy tycoons. From now on, higher GDP growth in a nation might only enrich the better skilled and better educated classes. In fact, the better educated classes tend to benefit more from GDP growth that is capital intensive. Until Thomas Piketty's pointed criticism, Anglo-Saxon economists might have deliberately suppressed the fact that the fruits of free market capitalism were never intended to be distributed fairly or equitably through mainstream society. It is not unemployment that is posing a problem in the industrially advanced economies of the West. The problem advanced economies face is low wages, underemployment, an acute shortage of blue-collar factory jobs. With commercial interests driving foreign policies within a modern democracy, the mainstream voter will be unable to influence decision-making. In most nations, mainstream voters have remained fairly unconcerned that their democracies were being commandeered by commercial interests. In fact, many democracies are under siege by business corporations and capitalist syndicates. Over a period half a century time, elected politicians have been consigned to peripheral roles. However, the corporate news media has maintained stoic silence on these developments. Even in America and Europe, newspapers have never made a mention of capitalist syndicates exerting their influence and arm-twisting the elected political elite.